Hey everybody, welcome back to Great Mondays Radio. With me today is the Chief People Officer of Simplisafe, Eileen Lem. She is joining us from the home offices of Simplisafe in Boston, Massachusetts. And we're going to talk to her a little bit about her journey being in HR throughout tech, how she got to Simplisafe, and starting out in strategy, and then maybe even a little bit of what she learned from things that went well and things that didn't go so well, going through that kind of hybrid return to office business that we all struggled with. Eileen, thank you so much for coming on Great Mondays Radio.
It is a great pleasure to be here and to share whatever I can with your listeners, Josh.
Well, you have a lot of history within HR and tech. And I wanted to know, let's start with when did when did culture first become something that like sort of popped up in your mind? You're like, oh, that's really important. Was it something that you kind of always knew was important, or because you're basically been in HR your entire career, so it's not necessarily that an HR person they're going to run into culture, but it's not necessary that they're passionate about it.
Yeah, I learned about culture pretty early on, I would say. I mean, it sort of started for me when I was in college and I was on the rowing team, and you know those uh posters that hang in offices everywhere where it says teamwork
Teamwork,
and
and it's
picture
the
of
it's
the cruise
the
shell and everything. Yeah, everybody rowing together.
yeah.
That's really where I learned about culture because I was on the crew team. And that was a pretty formative experience. But then when I graduated from college, I had the good fortune to start off at a strategy consulting firm called Monitor, which was a very different type of strategy
Sure.
consulting company than most. It was really a great training ground for me in terms of learning about culture because we did things a little bit differently there. We didn't have levels, we didn't have titles. Everybody was known as a consultant. We did things very, very uniquely there. And being steeped in that kind of culture and learning about how to attract talent and motivate talent without some of the typical trappings was a real boon for me.
So how did you end up kind of moving from strategy into the human side of the business?
Yeah, very non-traditionally. So I worked at the strategy consulting company for a while as a consultant. And eventually, after having done a number of different types of projects, I realized that I really wanted to get more into the operational side of things. And so, like a lot of people there at Monitor at the time, I was talking to my the person who staffed cases and the person who was responsible for career development of the consultants. And I said, I'm thinking about leaving. I'm thinking about doing something more operational. And they immediately said, well, how have you ever considered my job? My job, like running the company, helping to run the consulting firm. And I said, no, I really hadn't. But after 3 days, I think, I was in that person's job. They were looking for something else to do, and
You
they
just
needed
happen to be the next
help.
person.
I just happened to be the next person to jump into that job. And it was a phenomenal job. And that's really where I learned all about HR, if you will, by thinking about people's development, by thinking about how to design organizations, case teams,
Mhm.
how to make sure that consultants were delivering, how to motivate them, develop them, compensation strategy, you name it. I learned it all the not very non-traditional way. So that's how I came into it.
No, that's amazing. So, you've gone through and you spent time in HR, and you're now the chief people officer at Simply Safe, and you've been there 4 years, I think I saw
That's
on your
right.
LinkedIn.
4 years.
So that overlaps with the crisis moment that we've all went through, and running an people ops org is was kind of one of the most stressful pieces of that. Um, Tell me about. how you approached once we kind of got through the initial crisis. How did you think about your team, your staff, the people, the 1,000+ folks that are at Simply Safe, and how did you use your kind of strategic background to consider? You're like, well, how should we do this? Because I think we were joking before we started that I was like, if you have the answer, let me know. How did you first approach this? How did you think about, well, should we bring people back? Should we not bring people back? What was your thinking?
Yeah, it was a very, very eventful and critical time for all of us, right? I was lucky enough to join Simply Safe in June of 2020. So the initial everybody's got to get out of the offices and stay home, and all of those initial bumps had been traversed. And so I was more in the mode of what do we do now? And if there is going to be a new normal, which thankfully, hopefully we're now in the new normal,
Hmm.
was able to help navigate that scenario. But because we're Simply Safe and because we're a safety and security company, the security and safety of our employees and all of our partners was paramount. And so we were thinking about that first and foremost. And that led us to probably staying out of the office for quite a bit longer than most. I think that here in Boston, that was pretty much the trend anyway.
Hmm.
But then the other part of it, Josh, that we had to contend with was as a company and as our strategy, it's really, really dependent on us working in a very, very integrated manner. So we made the difficult decision to lean into that and have everybody come back to work sort of like on a hybrid basis. So we have a 2 day at least a week in the office hybrid system, and the other 5 days of the week, if you wish, you can work wherever you want. But that was really, really important to us. And also, what was really important to us was having everybody come in on the same days because we
That was,
found that
yep.
it's no good if I'm in, but the rest of my team is not in, or the people that I work with aren't in. We can't really do the collaborative things that need to be done in person. Like we can't do those in person.
It's not very useful, like just having the walls around you. So that was exactly going to be my next question. So, what were well, I guess maybe if you're still, I guess tell us if that's still true, if that's still the concept. But what are the kind of the constraints or rules? Is it about teams? Is it like 100% everybody has to come in the same day? Who gets to make those? Who gets to make that decision? And at what level? Right? Which days we come in.
Yeah, that's a really great question. We worked very, very closely with our the rest of my executive team peers, the department heads, the department leadership in order to determine sort of what cadence. The 2 days a week applies to our headquarters staff. It
Okay.
doesn't apply to some of our customer service agents, for example, nor does it apply to our monitoring specialists who are in the office 24/7. I mean, not individuals, not in
Not, yes,
24/7,
there is
but they're
always
running
staff.
the
Yeah.
office. They have to be working in the office. And
Yeah.
that's always been the case for us. We've had some groups dependent on their jobs need to be in the office. It's an in-office job. So
Yeah.
we took that into a consideration and account and really worked with department leaders to figure out which of those positions need to be here more consistently, which ones are on hybrid, which is the vast majority, and which ones could be remote, which is on an exception basis.
Hmm. Did you find any pushback? I have observed in my clients and other companies that there can be in the situation that you just described this duality, this separation where you have folks that have to be in they are front facing, customer facing, or like you said, monitoring. Was there did you guys experience any of that? You're like, well, why are they? Well, it's like you guys don't have to come in. Why do we have to come in? Was there any of that?
Oh yeah, of course. There's always some grumbling. People don't like change a lot. So the the key for us was to make sure that we're positioning our in-office strategy or a hybrid strategy um, with a grounding in our business strategy and in our culture. And again, what we noted up front was that our strategy really requires a huge amount of integration between technology, people and services, and making sure that we're serving our customers really, really well. So we have one of our values is one team,
Okay.
which we emphasize significantly in order to try and help everybody to understand like we need to really come together in order to facilitate collaboration, to make sure that um, that we can move fast as an organization, that we can make decisions quickly as an organization, that we frankly invest in some of the relationships that are necessary in order to have our company operate as successfully as it can. So our core values, there are six of them. Again, one of them is one team. We lean really, really tightly into that, along with lean and nimble, which is another one of our six values.
Um, yeah, so I love this, and it's interesting because as kind of hit you over the forehead obvious that it needs to be tied to the business strategy. I don't feel like a lot of people leaders have articulated it that way. Do you find that helps you make the case to employees? Let's talk about, it's like when we think about, I think, we talk about the grumblers, the laggards, or it's like change reticent. Is that, so obviously over here, you're making this decision because it's good for the business. But are you communicating, when you communicate that to everybody, does it help align people? Does it help bring people together, or is it, I don't know. I guess,
Yeah.
yeah. Is it help in the communications, right? In the engagement piece of it to articulate a business strategy?
Yeah. I think it does. And I would sharpen that up even more, Josh. It wasn't just that it was because of the strategy, it was imperative from a
Mm,
strategy perspective. And I think that that's one of the things that I learned as a strategy consultant is like actually strategy is a set of choices. And so it is has to be very sharp in terms of what you are doing and
what you're not doing.
what
Yep.
you're not doing. And so the wishy-washiness of it can get you into trouble sometimes. And so the clarity of the message of saying like this is really important to our strategy is it is a competitive advantage for us. Our culture is a competitive advantage for us. It necessitates this high degree of collaboration, which necessitates us being together on a
Hmm.
fairly frequent basis. Um, and also the fact that we balance that with sort of the best of both worlds with the flexibility of being able to work wherever you want for the other days. We felt like that was the way to go. And we've since continued to I don't really want to say double down on it. We've just continued to be very, very consistent in that. And
Hmm.
so people hopefully are taking from that consistency that we're not gonna, like Amazon one day just up and say, oh, actually, it's gonna be 5 days a week. I'm pretty sure that we're just gonna keep consistent with this 2 day a week cadence.
Yeah.
And that's a choice that we've made. And if
Yeah.
somebody comes to us and says, I really want to work for a remote first company, I'm like, well, there are lots of other remote first jobs out there. but that's just not for us. Sorry. And if that helps with self-selection, then that helps with self-selection.
I mean, so great, right? Like you found something that works, but there was so much ambiguity at the beginning. And I think that's where a lot of organizations have gotten into trouble. Okay, we're gonna, oh no, come on back. Okay, wait, no, it's gonna be right. And it's, and sure, the luxury of like, we have made this decision and we're gonna move forward. Obviously, that clarity and consistency is gonna be best. But how did you navigate that ambiguity? I mean, if you're, maybe it's just back to first principles, what we talked about since this whole time, which is the strategy. You're like, well, the business strategy is driving this thing, and I think this is going to be the way it's going to work. I don't know. I mean, that how did you how did you navigate the ambiguity at the beginning? Because a lot of companies are still not there.
I wish that I could say that we arrived at the quote unquote right answer, like right off the bat, and we just
Yeah.
stuck with it. That was not the case. We had many, many hours of knockdown, drag out discussions, that sometimes I would walk away and I'd say, like, what exactly did we resolve? I'm not sure that we did resolve anything. Um, I think that those discussions were incredibly useful, helpful,
Hmm.
painful,
Hmm.
but ultimately, I think has helped us as an executive team, because I'm not just doing this by myself. I'm doing this, with
Yeah.
our CEO and with my peers on the executive team. Those discussions really helped to hammer out a lot of different, nitty-gritty little details about how we were going to discuss this with people, how we were going to communicate it, were we going to, approach people who were clearly not getting with the program, like what were we going to do with them, et cetera, et cetera. So, I
Yeah.
mean, the devil is in the details, but I think that over the course of time, we have gotten into this very good place where we've tested and needed and tweaked and retweaked this to a place where we're all very, very comfortable now, and again can feel like we've got that commitment across the board.
Do you how do you help employees and managers and leaders determine what they need to be doing when they're together? Because there's this, I think, or at least I'm observing, maybe not, my head isn't completely aligned with the world, but the way that I see it is there's certain kinds of tasks and things to do when you're together, and there's ones that are better done alone. Do you have a guideline? Do you train folks? This is what we're doing together. Did you realize that later on once you figured out you're like, oh, everybody has to come in together?
We a little bit of yes, all of that, all of the above.
Say
Um,
more.
we We're doing a little bit of research to try and figure out what are some of those things that are best done in person versus some of those things that are best done
Hmm.
alone. And then we did a little bit of rejiggering of all of our calendars in order to focus the time in the office in team meetings or team activities. And tried to push some of the more individual stuff to the sides. We also were able to declare the the afternoons on Fridays to be focus Fridays, meeting free. And that allowed us to focus, literally that time
Yeah.
on just individual heads down work if you need to without distraction,
Yeah.
or if you needed to use it in other ways in order to help spur the creative juices, or, just rest and recover. However you wanted to use that time, you could use that time. But um, by specifying, specific types of time and by realizing like we controlled a good number of the team meetings. We have our executive team meetings on Tuesday mornings. We have our
Hmm.
departmental leadership team meetings in the afternoons on Tuesdays, and Wednesdays are, sort of again, I think more focused on utilizing our space here for team collaboration. Um, it just sort of happened naturally, to be honest with you, with a little bit of
Yeah.
urging, and a little bit of corralling
Do,
on a couple different fronts.
do you feel like your managers have learned that through osmosis, the modeling? It does. Yeah, I guess your point is like, well, we did a little this, little that, little this, little that. I mean, I think a lot of organizations would and maybe the luxury is, 1,000 person company isn't all that unwieldy, is probably what I'm inferring, because there's a lot of other companies that are like, well, what are, you have to kind of say, this is how we're doing it. This is how we're bringing people together. But what I realized is that you can't just like, it's not just like, okay, whole company in, okay, whole company out, right? There's like teams that are going to work together. And so you have to everybody has to learn anew, right? We didn't learn this skill set, this truth in business school. We just didn't learn it growing up, even early in our career. There's a whole new experience that we have. And I'm trying to get at that, like, what are folks doing to help employees realize that there's great stuff to be done together and there's great stuff to be done apart. And the postscript on that point is, there isn't I'm not seeing this conversation in the Amazon-esque return to office. It's all or nothing. There's just not a conversation around what we do well together and what we do apart. It's like there's not a realization of it. Do you have any thoughts around, reflections around that?
A couple different things. I mean, first of all, I think that we do really benefit from our size, our scale, the fact that we're in a technology
Yeah.
industry. I mentioned lean and nimble is one of our values, our six core values, and I think that um, embracing of change, that resilience, the ability to, kind of make decisions and move quickly, is a benefit to, 1,200 employee size company,
Hmm.
certainly. I also think that one of the hallmarks of our culture is that we treat our managers, we treat our leaders with the respect that they deserve, and we give them a lot of autonomy and the ability to trust them to make really good judgments. I said that we kind of modeled a little bit with trying to structure out and saying like, okay, Friday afternoons is focus time, and try and do some of your meetings more on the Tuesdays, Wednesdays, whenever you're in the office with your teams. And for the most part, I think that managers and leaders realize like, hey, this is the guidance that's being given to me. But they were we trusted them. We relied on them to exercise their good judgment for their specific teams and for their specific ways of working. And so we really leaned into that quite a bit, Josh.
Easy to say, hard to do.
It is.
I
It
think
is.
there's a lot to the trusting in there, kind of giving them that autonomy. And my hunch, and even this week, I've had a few conversations where, and thinking about again, the kind of everybody back to the office, Amazon dictate, we're going into a time where leaders will need to give employees more autonomy if we're going to be working apart. And, it's not saying you're not going to get, you don't have folks that might, you check in with, but it just doesn't work as well, I think, in this kind of distributed world, whether you're hybrid or 100%, in the same way. That what that this is this week's realization, but I'm just pulling the threads here on what you're
Yeah.
saying, I think.
Well, I mean, look, we're not giving people full flexibility, right? We're still saying, hey, you need to work within 2 days a week,
Yeah,
type of model, but
yeah,
within
yeah,
that
yeah.
2 day a week model, and within those rules, you've got lots of flexibility. And I think that that's another hallmark of our culture here at Simply Safe is where we have something that really was a hallmark of our chair and our founder. This concept of no ego. Now, no ego doesn't really mean no ego, of course. We have egos, but we
It's
really do
aspirational.
try to lean into, great ideas happen wherever, and we don't have that much of a hierarchical structure here. We don't have a lot of politics. We don't have a lot of like people throwing their titles around, very much like Monitor, which is why I love this culture so much, is because it feels very familiar to me. Um, but that no ego effectively does put a lot of responsibility and a lot of the accountability on individuals, whether they're managers or individual contributors or leaders, to basically make sure that they're exercising really good judgment.
Yeah, 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 yeah. Great. Okay, so we'll kind of start to wrap up here and talk a little bit about Simply Safe and maybe the future. So I'm seeing a lot of or hearing a lot of ads in my podcast feeds, which I think means that there's growth that's going to be happening for you guys. What are you seeing, and how are you preparing for what is to come for Simply Safe?
We have been incredibly successful in growing this company, even throughout very, very challenging circumstances, whether it was the pandemic or these latest macro environment challenges with interest rates. And one of the things that drives our business is, people who are moving and kind of crimping the style on the mortgage rates has not been very easy for us, but yet we continue to grow because we have such an incredible and successful product.
Yeah.
And we're looking forward to continuing to double down on that. Where we've got actually a brand new service, product and service that's launching today, called
Ooh,
Active Guard, and
okay.
we're very excited about what this is going to bring to us, not only here, but also we have a small office in Manchester, UK that we're hoping to continue to grow. We've got
Okay.
offices in Richmond, Virginia that we are hoping to grow. We're looking for very much forward to where we take this company and what we can do in order to help make sure that we're keeping every home secure, which is our mission.
Excellent. Well, I really appreciate, and you started out by saying that you're answering my first question around the connection between that you are a safety and security company, and that was the priority on the inside as well, which is not, aligning that external and internal and, I call it brand message, and activating that, I think is no small feat. It is something that I think speaks to the integrity of the organization, and I just want to reflect that and call that out because I think it's such a powerful way to create strategic alignment inside and out. And so, well done there. And I really appreciate you spending some time and sharing some of your wisdom, hard-earned wisdom, with us and my audience.
Well, thank you so much, Josh. It was a pleasure.
Hailey Lim, of Chief People Officer of Simply Safe. You can learn more at simplysafe.com. Thanks for coming on Great Mondays Radio.
Thank you.